Thank you, Kuya Gary of Migrante New York, for presenting the social policy part of the People's Agenda for Change. We can take one or two clarifying questions. We can save big questions for later. Yes.
Is water privatized in the Philippines? Currently, you have to pay exorbitant amounts.
Yep. Especially in urban centers like Metro Manila.
It's owned by foreign companies or you Philippine companies?
It used to be public, private. Now I think some portions of the country have completely privatized them. But I think the guests from the Philippines can provide more answers.
In Metro Manila, the water is actually being owned by the Ayalas and and then the Lopeses from the ABS-CBN.
It's no longer owned by the offices. It has been sold to Metro Pacific
Yeah, exactly.
by Pangilinan. And
Yeah.
the real owner are Indonesia.
Oh yes, because it's Pangilinan.
The money that came from Suharto. Because actually what's happening in the Philippines, I think it is being sold right now. Because previously, all presidents who became a president in the Philippines were being financed by the oligarchs, by the Chinese, Lucio Tan, Xi, the Ayalas, and everything. So these people are the very people who rules the Philippines. It's not really the president. Just like Aquino. You know, when Aquino sit in office, after 3 months, the 3,000 container ban were lost from the custom. It's only Malacanang who does not know it. Chinatown knows about it. Subic knows about it. Clarkfield knows about it. Only the president does not know about it. Because Lucio Co, the #1 smuggler in the Philippines, is one of the financiers of Aquino during his campaign. What's good that happened now in the Philippines, Duterte did not get any funding from these oligarchs. So he can do whatever he wants. He's not being dictated by these oligarchs. And now, as we are talking about the internet, you know, the Ayalas controls Globe, then Pangilinan controls Smart and PLDT. Now, they're not delivering to us the proper services. But now, Duterte is now letting other investors to come in because it is being controlled by these people who spend during the election.
Yeah, these are very important and really aggravating points.
I know somebody from even Foundation.
Yes.
You know what happened with the MRT? MRT, it is you exposed to what's happening with the MRT. MRT is supposed to be delivered back to the government at no cost. Since this is what you call build, operate, and transfer. So in a few years, they have to give this MRT to the government for free. So they did not do anything to say improve the services because they are supposed to give it back to the government. The anomaly that happened, you people were the one to expose this. The Aquino government, instead of waiting for the MRT to be delivered to the government for free, they paid the people, the exponent, the full amount of the MRT. After that, they asked the former owner to operate it again with the government guarantee that they will not lose any single cent. That is how our government is being ruled by the oligarchs. It is the oligarchs who really rules the government. It's not the president. It is not the senators. I only learned this after 40 years. You have insights.
Take to the streets now.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. So we'll keep moving on. So the next part of the People's Agenda for Change is actually national sovereignty and foreign policy. And now Janine of Gabriela New York, the women's organization, will be speaking on that. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Magandang hapon, maayong buntag. So I think what we've discussed in the economic portion and the social policy portions are basically the manifestations of the lack of those services, the lack of those the absence of those economic policies are basically reflections of empire and imperialism. So this aspect is what we're really, how empire and imperialism, what the face of it in the Philippines and what it looks like. So, and as we've already discussed earlier, as Anna mentioned in her presentation about, and Duterte has been very public in terms of his position towards the United States. And one of the recent things that he has said that during his election is, saying straight to the US and to Australia that, I will cut ties with you should I become president. There was also a recent article, again, about how it is the United States and not the Middle East that is importing terrorism. And other things to also keep in mind is that, and given that he was the mayor of Davao, which was an area that has been targeted by military interventionism for a long time, the US interventionism specifically, he is open in this regard. And even with the Spratly Islands, which has been a contested region in the Philippines for under many administrations, many decades, he has said, I'm not going to rely on the US, I'm going straight to Beijing and, cutting the US out in terms of those kinds of negotiations. But given all of that, there is still a people's agenda in relation to national sovereignty and foreign policy. So our major calls are an adoption of an independent foreign policy, given that currently the foreign policy in the Philippines is not independent. If you can just imagine what it's like to be in the United States and have the armed forces of the Philippines and come here, and the armed forces of the Philippines come here to train and to set up bases, it's hard to imagine. But that's what the US is doing in the Philippines, and that has been the underpinning of the foreign policy of the Philippines for a long time. Also active assertion of national sovereignty and defense of territorial integrity. So with the fact that the US military presence for many years, since the Philippines first came in combat after the Philippine-American War, the fact that these bases have just only proliferated, and especially with, which is anti the economic policies that we put forth before, towards the US pivot to Asia in terms of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, these military installments and agreements that are not mutually beneficial have only increased in recent years. And in relation to that, to review and terminate all unequal military agreements, of which there are many acronyms. So the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, EDCA, the Visiting Forces Agreement, DFA, and they just keep growing, and there are no time limits on any of these kinds of agreements. Suspension of foreign military exercises under the VFA, the fact that these forces are not visiting, they're staying. Not only are they staying, they're also committing human rights violations. If you're familiar with the Jennifer Laude case, as was discussed earlier, with a trans Filipino who was killed by a US Marine. And this follows another case in which there was another Filipino woman who was raped by US Marine in the early 2000s. These kinds of human rights violations continue to happen with the proliferation of these agreements. Suspension of any new bases under EDCA, because again, with the pivot to Asia, these bases are just increasing. And also support for Filipino fisherfolk in Philippine exclusive economic zones. So the fact that, as we know that, given that the Philippines doesn't have national sovereignty concretely, and that the US presence in our military, in our economy, in our culture, very important access routes and points to fill that are stagnate Philippine economic growth, but only serve to support US economic interests, are basically the waterways, right? When you think of where the Philippines is located, there's a basic channel between the Visayas and Mindanao that allows access to Singapore, that allows access to the rest of the Southeast Asian region. And so Filipino fisherfolk who their livelihood is off of those waterways, they're not able, they also experience human rights violations, economic violence, given that those waterways are maintained and controlled by US military. So our specific demands, right? I'm just gonna try and summarize it. So the stop Balikitan exercises in joint military operations, right? So again, you can't imagine another country's military doing those kinds of things here, right? So as the US has emerged as a superpower, and especially with the neo-colonial relationship or the continuing imperialist relationship with the Philippines, these are the kinds of exercises that continue in Philippines, on Philippine soil, and with the impact on our environment, on our people. Also to dismantle communication facilities, stop construction of U.S. military facilities, stop the entry of U.S. nuclear powered ships, all drone surveillance, and also investigate past activities and current operations of the Joint Special Operations Task Force. So another thing to understand about the face of the U.S. military in the Philippines, they're not just sending any old person to the Philippines, right? They're doing like special operations, right? In terms of, and not only U.S. military, but also other law enforcement agencies here in the United States train in the Philippines. So for example, the NYPD has a counterterrorism unit based in the Philippines to do training there. The Bay Area Rapid Transit has forces that train in the Philippines also. And if you're not familiar with the Oscar Grant case, in terms of the Bay Area Rapid Transit police officer who killed an unarmed Black man after on January 1st. So those police officers, those forces train in the Philippines as well. So in terms of economic trade and foreign relations, is to create a multi-sectoral, so crossing all types of sectors in the Philippines. So from women to workers to peasants and farmers and scientists and professionals that will review the current existing treaties and agreements in trade and financing, right? The impact of those unequal trade agreements, those unequal finance agreements that are, resulting in the plunder, right? And resulting in open pit mining, affecting displacement, also resulting in killings, as we've seen in Mindanao and elsewhere in the Philippines. And in the midterm would be review all economic trade agreements, such as with the World Trade Organization and APEC, and military treaties and agreements with other countries, and end all unequal treaties that are detrimental to Philippine sovereignty, environment, and people. So also to jump, there are many economic partnerships with countries that that are unequal. So for example, the Japan-Philippines Economic Partnership Agreement. Who's been to Mindanao here? I know a couple of us have been, right? So the thing is, in the northeast region of Mindanao, right, or Caraga, you'll see like there's a whole area, a town called Claver, where almost a lot of the mining corporations are Japanese owned. It's like Taganito, etc. Even names that are not patently Japanese are still Japanese owned. And it's because of these kinds of agreements. And also the WTO and APEC as mentioned, and also the TPPA, which is the US-centric pivot to Asia, but also there is a Chinese-centric pivot that is a regional comprehensive economic partnership. Also explore and develop diplomatic relations in cooperation with other countries, and investigate foreign agencies and entities that directly intervene in Philippine economic and political affairs. So in terms of foreign aid grants and loans, stop all USAID funded projects that are being used as entry for oil exploration, surveillance, and mapping. Oh, wow, okay. I have 2 minutes. Okay, so midterm. And also review all existing foreign aid, whether grants or loans, whether they're grants or loans, and also review all loans and grants, especially from the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and existing conditional ties. So as we know about OFWs and migrants, the fact that there is no the fact that the absence of economic policy, the absence of social policy in the Philippines has resulted in 10% of the population to migrate outside of the Philippines. But as a result of that, we have at least 90 OFWs that are on death row. And so because of that is to release all of those Filipino migrants who are on death row, particularly as we know the case of Mary Jane Veloso. And also publicize all foreign agreements and policies in OFWs. Given that because of these agreements with other countries, Filipinos are even referred to as like a domestic worker in a colloquial way, right? So in Israel, Filipinos are called Filipini, or in Greece, we're called Filipiniesa, and that's how they're talking to refer to nannies or refer to domestic workers. So it's important for us to implement a policy so that does not happen, and not only about the colloquial references, it's also about the fact that how the Filipino migrants are treated, right, in terms of discrimination, the fact that if you bear a child in the Philippines, if a Filipino OFW in Israel bears a child, they are not even Israeli nationals, because if both parents are not Israeli nationals. And that's not just happening in Israel, it's also happening in Canada, it's also happening in Hong Kong. So environment and climate change. As I said earlier, a lot of these military operations and operations by foreign corporations and foreign corporate interests have had a negative impact on the environment. So we're calling on Duterte's administration to change that. Human rights and peace is to ensure that oppose the U.S. intervention in the peace talks. And so as we know that, the reflection of the U.S. control is also as this intervening in the peace talks. And we're ensuring that, these peace talks should happen in a way that that they're in good faith with the Philippine government and also with the NDF, the National Democratic Front of the Philippines. And also investigate reports of cases of rendition. So this case of Gregan Cardenio, he was hired as a translator by the Armed Forces of the Philippines and was killed like 2 days later. And under suspicious circumstances, and nothing came out of it. So it's a call attention to those cases, ensure that they don't continue. And again, maritime disputes. These are issues where the U.S. is very present, right? It's in terms, you control the waterways, you control the economy. So it's to ensure that the fisher folk in the Philippines and Philippine sovereignty is maintained in terms of maritime issues.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Janine of Gabriela, New York. We'll take 1 or 2 clarifying questions.
Gabriela?
Yes.
As a representative of Gabriela, you people protecting the Filipino women, you didn't speak about so much about the this domestic helper being exported by the Philippines. I think this should be stopped.
Of course.
The exportation of domestic helper, just like what happened in Japan when we stopped the exportation of Japayu, we call the Japayu case. This should be treated as a human trafficking for me. Because most of the domestic helper are being abused, especially in the Middle East. There should be a minimum wage if they should work as a domestic helper. And as you said, in England, if you are a Filipina, it means you are a domestic helper. That is in the Oxford Dictionary. You people, you didn't object on that when they made the Oxford Dictionary. Your organization should have been the first one to object on that. Just imagine, Filipina, you are as a Filipina, you are considered as a domestic helper.
Yes, thank you. I think these are all really good points to bring up again in the breakout groups towards the end. So we are nearing the end of our presentations, and then the last hour of the forum will be dedicated to discussion and conversations on what should happen next. So we'll definitely welcome all of these inputs, and I want to just affirm that it's good that people are getting fired up, and it's good that people are thinking, right? So I just want to introduce the next speaker.
Another one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
We just have a
Sure.
You have been saying about the Americans, about the Chinese, what they did to us in the Philippines when they reclaimed that shores. Well, in most of the fishermen from Zambales and Pangasinan, their living was taken by the Chinese. When they
Actually,
reclaimed that
the Spratlys,
it's not the Spratlys.
another
It's the
area.
Pagasas Shoal.
A lot of them were actually, it happened under
Spratlys is
Arroyo,
different from the Pagasas Shoal.
but Arroyo also allowed a lot of contracting with China to allow that to happen, which hasn't been abrogated till
We
this
should
day.
we should focus more on the Chinese right now.
Right. But those agreements
Because,
are opened by
that is an
GMA.
invasion, it's an invasion. That is within our economic zone.
Of course.
Spratlys that within our economic zone.
All right, thank you. We're gonna go ahead and move on to the next topic so that we can have a more fruitful discussion later. So the next topic will be peace and human rights, and Nat Agosto of the New York Committee for Human Rights in the Philippines will be facilitating the part on peace and human rights. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nat. I am with New York Committee for Human Rights in the Philippines. And so I just kind of want to go through a little bit of some of what Duterte has said and done regarding human rights, and also what the people are demanding to be done about human rights in the Philippines. One of the things I want to touch upon is that there definitely has been this comparison, right, to Donald Trump. But we argue that it's not a valid comparison because Donald Trump would never sit with members of opposing parties and invite them to join his government and really partake in a deep conversation with them. And so there's a big difference between Donald Trump and Duterte. And I just want to kind of talk about that very, very briefly and touch on it. So Duterte has openly discussed that he wants to engage in the peace talks. He also wants to allow exiled folks to be able to come back to the Philippines. And what's really important about the peace talks is that without the peace talks, the government has been engaging in violations of the CARIL, which is the Comprehensive Agreement of Respect and Human Rights in International Humanitarian Law. And so there has been violations of that, as well as the JSIG, which is the Joint Agreements for, somebody help me out here, safety and immunity. And so there have been violations of that happening because the peace talks have been cut out and not continued. And the reason for that is because the previous administrations did not want to sit at the table with the MPA, with the NDF, and so because of that, therefore they discontinued them. But Duterte has agreed to continue them, and so that's part of the 15-point program, is that we want those to resume, and also we want the ones that have been started with the MILF to also be completed. And the other thing about this is that because the peace talks have not been completed, it has allowed increased militarization in certain areas, which has targeted activists who are speaking out against the government, and has red tagged them and has created human rights violations against them, where they have been killed and tortured and imprisoned. And one of the things that Duterte has also stated that he will do is release political prisoners, which is another thing that is on our list for the program. Within the first 100 days of President Rodrigo Duterte, we want him to resume the formal peace talks with the National Democratic Front of the Philippines in accordance with previously signed bilateral agreements, resume a genuine peace process that will address the roots of the armed conflict in Muslim Mindanao in order to achieve a just and lasting peace that is inclusive and unifying without undermining the peace agreements forged between the Philippine government and the MNLF. We also want the discontinuation of the anti-people counterinsurgency programs patterned after the U.S. counterinsurgency first field manual. Stop Aklan Bayanihan and all its programs and projects, including those under the guise of civil-military operations, such as the Whole of Nation Initiative, and realign the national budget for Aklan Bayanihan to indemnify victims of human rights violations and provide needed social services and rehabilitation to victims of forceful evacuation. So another one of our demands is to get justice for victims of human rights violations under the previous administration. And so the idea is that this budget that has been used for counterinsurgency and has been used to violate human rights in the past would be then used to be able to provide justice for those victims of it. In addition to this, not only are we asking for the government to pull out its troops with guns, but also to pull out its kind of supposed aid, because this aid is actually under the guise of trying to target activists and target civilians in order to continue to perpetrate torture. So Duterte has also stated some contradictory statements to human rights. He has talked about death squads and has vowed to kill all drug lords, but he has talked about killing them extrajudicially, and he has even encouraged the public to kill drug addicts. And one of the things that we are demanding is that respect for human rights and gives full play to democracy, which includes that all people have the right to fair trials and to be able to go through the legal process. And so we don't want to advocate the extrajudicial killings of drug addicts or of any drug dealers, but we want to put them through the process to be able to be charged for their crimes, right? So respect human rights and give full play to democracy. Duterte on journalist murders has also said that any journalists who have taken bribes or engaged in other corrupt activities also deserve to die. you are not exempted from assassination, and that he would address the problems of media killings in the Philippines after a reporter was shot dead in Manila a couple of months ago. And so, again, kind of stating that if journalists are taking bribes or engaging in corrupt activities, that is wrong, right? And they should be held to due process. But we also want to say that we want to uphold the press freedom and the people's right to know, and to stop media killings and decriminalize libel and accelerate the prosecution of all the perpetrators in the Embak One massacre. So we want to bring them to justice as well. And that's kind of a summation of the human rights agenda for that's it. What we want.
Thank you, Nat from New York Committee for Human Rights in the Philippines. Now we'll take clarifying questions on specific points that Nat just talked about in their presentation. Maybe we can hear from folks who haven't had a chance to ask questions, Chris. So one or two folks. Anybody? Besides Cleo.
Just ask Leila. So, when you talk about peace talks, you're talking about in Mindanao or?
So, I mean, the armed conflict is not just in Mindanao, right? It's obviously that's the biggest point of where the armed conflict is, but it would engage in all of the kind of armed conflict that is there.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Another question?
I know there's the demand to stop U.S. military aid. Is there a demand to do something about China? Is there some?
That would be more into the national sovereignty question. I don't have an answer for that. I'm going to ask if J9 or.
Yes, so the Philippine National Democratic Movement is in firm opposition of China's incursion in the Philippines. We just have to make that clear that if you are anti-U.S. imperialism, that doesn't mean you are pro-China. Because we have stood against China and we have protested against China too. But what we are saying is U.S. imperialism in the Philippines have been going on for so long, longer than what the Chinese are doing. And we're not saying that the Chinese or the U.S., they both have to go. That's what national sovereignty means. But we are just pointing out to the United States because, like I said, they've been there for so long and they have really caused so much, trouble in our country. And we're not saying that the Chinese is doing less, but they are not the biggest problem right now as far as addressing national sovereignty is concerned.
We have a follow-up on that.
I think the question, and I just want to clarify, is that yes, we do stand against Chinese China incursion, but is it written in the program?
Yeah, is it?
No, we're not demanding the Duterte government. He already took a position against the U.S. imperialism. As far as his position in China, we don't know yet, but we are against China.
Yeah.
Do you have a follow-up in the back? Yes.
Just following up that statement. We're against all kinds of imperialism. We don't want our country to be under any foreign policy or any other country at all to control our governance and our resources. Why US? Because US has been there since Laurel Langley Law. US has colonized us. Spain sold us for $20 million together with other countries, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Hawaii, and Guam. But it's only in the Philippines that base had a contract. And US stayed there until when? 1992? After 1992, US sent Visiting Forces Agreement. Up to now, they have that program occupying all our bases. So we are particularly the biggest imperialist, which is US. And of course, we don't agree that China will control us too. Can we not stand as our own country, having our nationalized government? So that's what we're asking Duterte. Second, I would like to address that armed conflict. Armed conflict is all over the country. But why in Mindanao that is being highlighted? Because there are two kinds of resistant movement in Mindanao. We have the Moro movement, who has been there, what's considered as the longest resistant movement in history internationally. Because the Moro is a wrong people. I am a Moro, and up to now, I am in pain. Basically, of course, I have a pain in my arm right now, but I am in pain. My self-esteem. that my land was taken away from me without permission and sold together with the rest of the islands of the Philippines under the Treaty of Paris and became the bad guys. Throughout history, we are treated as pirates, we're treated as traitor. We are advertised all over the educational system of the Philippines that we are bad people because we resisted the Spaniards, we resisted the Americans. Treaties after treaties, when the Philippines was sold to America, treaties after treaties was given to us Moro people and telling us to register our lands to the US government when we owned our land, when ancestors owned that land since history since. So that is why the armed conflict in Mindanao is so much highlighted because there are two kinds of peace process, peace agreement that is being arranged right now in Mindanao. And as a Moro, I will raise my fist on that flag too, because your minorities as being treated. But if you look at it, we carry the ancestral heritage of the Philippines that would empower the Filipinos.
Say, how about changing the name of the Philippines?
So right up like this. But the fifth and final part will be corruption and governance that will be facilitated by Janela of Anak. Alright.
Well, I don't know if folks can actually see that. But just to talk briefly about Duterte's stance on corruption and governing the Philippines, he has absolutely is very definite against fighting corruption. To the point that he even stated at one of his speeches that it makes him sick, right? And also to the point that he said that he would really track down and really make thorough investigations on whoever in the whole government, whoever would essentially make sort of corrupt actions. He would definitely out them. For example, recently around July 4, July 5, he actually outed 5 police officers who were related to a drug scandal. But ultimately, Duterte has not provided a whole anti-corruption campaign. So which is why the People's Agenda has also been made to help support that. So number 1, it is to institute a pro-people budget and fiscal policies, right? And what essentially the People's Agenda is fighting for is, in regards to this, there are 7 points. Number 1, it's to give top budgetary priorities to programs or projects for industrialization, agrarian reform, agricultural modernization, protection of the environment, basic social services, and salaries and benefits for the government employees in general, the General Appropriations Act, which is the operating budget of the Philippines, or rather creates the operating budget of the Philippines. Number 2 is to abolish pork barrel by promulgating a law that prohibits and penalizes appropriation, allocation, and release of lump sum discretionary funds, and by mandating line item budgeting and strict audit of regular and special funds. Number 3 is to adapt debt relief measures, including debt payment or scheduling and repudiation of onerous and fraudulent debts, to rechannel part of debt servicing allocation to programs for industrialization, agricultural modernization, and social services. Right, so these were ultimately talked about earlier during the economic portion. Number 4 is to reduce military and state security expenditures in order to increase the public funds and other resources for economic development and social services. We must allow the U.S. or any other power to draw us towards heavy military expenditures on. We must not allow, the U.S. or any other power to draw us towards heavy military expenditures on the pretext of either internal or external defense. Number 5 is to review the appropriations for CCT, or the conditional cash transfer, which is actually the 4Ps program, Pambansang Pamilya program ng Pilipinas, and other dole-outs. We have to make sure that they work for the rechanneling of these allotments to education, health, and other social services while providing sustainable employment for the beneficiaries. Number 6, to exempt from paying income tax workers whose monthly wages and salaries are below 30,000 pesos and a minimum cost of living for a family of 5. And number 7 is to review and reform the present system of progressive taxation and introduce a progressive system that reduces tax burden on the poor and middle income earners, to increase the tax rates on corporate profits of large corporations, high income individuals or families, luxury goods and services, wealth and property, and hot money financial transactions. This is the most rational and sustainable way of ensuring adequate resources for social services and the needs of the poor majority of Filipinos. So that was pretty much, again, to institute the pro-people budget and fiscal policy, which was also pretty much highly gone into depth in regards to the economic portion. For number 2, to fully promote and realize and defend democracy. And there are about 9 points on that in the People's Agenda. The first one being to empower the poor and marginalized sectors and assert the will and interests of the majority of the Filipino people. Encourage and enable the full participation of the workers and peasants in the political life of the country. To establish mechanisms to ensure the people's right to supervise and hold accountable all elected officials. Number 2, to enact measures that will reform the political and electoral system with the end view of giving the majority representation in government decision-making bodies to the workers, farmers, and other marginalized sectors, professionals, and patriotic businessmen. The electoral system should not be used to deceive and perpetuate the oppression and exploitation of the marginalized sectors. The current automated electoral system, which allows pre-programming of results, must be rejected. Number 3, to dismantle political dynasties by passing and implementing a law that prohibits 2 or more blood and law-related individuals from alternately or simultaneously running for and holding elected positions at the national and local levels. Number 4, to recognize and respect the rights of the Cordillera, the modern indigenous peoples, national minorities over their ancestral lands, self-determination, preservation of their culture. To ban all projects impinging on ancestral lands and threatening to displace all indigenous peoples and other native residents. Number 5, to promulgate transparency in governments. Pass the Freedom of Information Law that the President's executive sans President's executive privilege and the vague and overly broad exceptions. Number 6, to reorient the armed forces of the Philippines and the Philippine National Police to inculcate patriotism, professionalism, integrity in service, and respect for human rights. To forbid the military and police from suppressing people's legitimate struggles and political activities. Number 7, to pass a law that strengthens the party list system as exclusive for the marginalized and underrepresented sectors and prohibit rich and powerful parties or organizations from participating in the system. Number 8, to enact measures mandating workers, farmers, women, and indigenous people representation in local governments. To institute mechanisms to ensure that genuine people's associations and organizations are involved in policy formulations at all levels of government. And number 9, to fight electoral fraud and violence. Set in place that the Filipino IT-provided automated election system that ensures private voting and public counting and with enough safeguards against election cheating. So ultimately, with number 2, it's to combat really, like, for example, pork barrel, that whole idea of that whole scheme that happened or had happened in the past few decades, unfortunately, as well as to really propagate the people that make up the Philippines, that really run the Philippines, that they have equal representation in government. And number 3, for the final big point, is to vigorously fight graft and corruption in the big-time criminal syndicates. And there are 6 points in regards to that under the People's Agenda. Officials and their close relatives and the corporations or any business organization to which they belong from benefiting from business privileges and transactions within their scope of authority. To investigate and charge in court corrupt and erring officials regardless of political affiliation and connections, including administration officials, allies, kamag-anak, kaibigan, at kapartido. Number 2, to strictly carry out all existing laws against graft and corruption. To hold accountable and prosecute public officials and private individuals involved in the Mama Sapana fiasco, the illegal disbursement acceleration programs and all scams and anomalies of the Priority Development Assistance Funds, the Malampaya, PAGCOR, PSCR, Bureau of Internal Revenues, and Bureau of Customs. Number 3, to conduct a full and independent audit of alleged abuse, misuse, and corruption of the Overseas Workers Welfare Agency funds from the term of former President Arroyo to present, and to conduct a full evaluation of all of this office's existing programs. Number 4, to investigate officials involved in Tanim Bala extortion scheme, whether it's the Department of Transportation, the Manila International Airport, the Noynoy Aquino International Airport. For number 5, to hold accountable government officials involved in the criminal neglect of the victims of Super Typhoon Yolanda and El Nino. To investigate the anomalous distribution of the Emergency Shelter Assistance Fund and full audit and assessment of disbursement of Yolanda Calamity Fund and donations. And number 6, to wage a series of campaigns to bust big-time drugs, robbery, kidnap for ransom, gambling, prostitution, and human trafficking syndicates for their protectors in the government, especially within the police, military, and local government units, and to get the cooperation of barangays and communities for prompt reporting and prevention of crimes. And that, in the most briefest crash course kind of way, is the corruption in government's topic for the people.
All right. Thank you, Janelle of Anabayan, New York, for the very fast, very choppy run through of corruption and governance, the people's side. We'll take 1 or 2 clarifying questions about the points that Janelle made. We have one here.
It's a question about the utilization of, I guess, the non-government organizations and trying to formulate policy. Is that something that's feasible within the Constitution of the Philippines?
Sorry, which organization?
NGOs, basically. I mean, just saying organizations and groups trying to have an influence on policy. Is that something that's feasible given the structure of the government? Well, Lisa, I said the exact word that you basically stated, progressive organization groups having influence over policy. I'm just paraphrasing. Advisory role on policy, how can that be done within the scope of U.S. Constitution?
We have a direct response.
Like under the Philippines government, right? Those are the like in the countryside, like they have farmers groups that are not actually farmers. So we're trying to push for a more authentic representation of farmers and fisher folks and stuff like that in these consultative councils, because it takes place. It's part of the government system already. But the government, what they do previously was to handpick farmers and fisher folk and stuff like that. And to add to that, since you have representatives from the mass movement, like we have Paeng Mariano of the Kilusan Bukid of Filipinas, who's at the Department of Agrarian Reform. So we are sure that he will push, the agenda of the farmers inside his people's organization, inside the administration of the DEP. So there are different mechanisms to do that.
Yeah, answers your question. One or two more questions about this section, corruption in government.
So when you talk about election fraud, is the problem vote buying, or is it vote counting, or is it both, or is there another problem that I don't know about?
All of it.
All of it. Okay. Is there another one that I didn't mention that you haven't?
That's from my understanding. That's what those 2 were the main.
Okay.
Do you have a direct response
No, I have just a question.
about his question?
Well, it's attached to his question, but
Okay.
one of the points was to reject the current method of counting votes, and I'm wondering, what the proposal is for, how is that going to happen? How can we ensure that that's whatever the new way is not going to be just as corrupt as the old way?
So in one of the points from what I can recall, is essentially there would be a technological service that would really can really lay out and really watch over these votes. So that to really prevent electoral fraud.
There's an answer here too.
The professionals union. Our proposals are specifically, first of all, to like we have our own technicians, engineers, computer programmers to hire these people instead of relying on Smartmatic who's from another country who might influence it. It's national elections of the Philippines. Why do we ask someone from another country to watch over that? And actually, what we were pushing for in the past automated elections was four things. First of all, hash code. Hash code is like the source code or the program. It should be made public so that people, engineers and technicians who can understand computer language can see like if there are backdoors, if there are ways they can easily tamper, these kind of stuff which were not present in the previous automated elections. We are pushing for the administration of Duterte to make it more visible. Secondly, there was no end-to-end testing with the previous elections, like from the casting of votes with the vote machines to the transmission servers is another machine to transmit the votes from the machine to the municipality, to the province, to the national levels. There were no testing done on all of this. It was all piecemeal. So these are the specific kinds of safeguards that we're pushing for the Duterte administration.
Just a reaction, actually. As I said earlier, these are very broad statements. Like the corruption that you were mentioning earlier, how do you operationalize that? I mean, like, for example, okay, right now, if you really want, say, to push for the development, think of ways and means how you can, bring this about through major programs, like study about the advantages of being a parliamentary system where you can disperse development. So if you disperse development, and then much of the issues will be resolved. Secondly, also there'll be less expenditures when it's going to be local, as opposed to a general election where you will spend billions for the presidency just to be able to make it work for you. So these things are things that we need to look into. At the same time, also, all of the things that are being said are really good. I mean, we've been talking about this since I was in my 20s. Now I'm 65. But I guess what we really need to do is really get really into this so-called cultural revolution where we know people will be vigilant. They know exactly what they want for, and they will be going after those plunderers, past and present. Not only the present, but as well as the past. Can you imagine how much money we could get from these plunderers of the past? And we can look like this, what the various programs that we intend to do for the Filipino people. Like, for example, PopCorp, which has been the milking cow of the politicos now. Duterte has made a commitment to use those budgets to help in the hospitalization of the poor people of the Philippines. So, these things are kind of, they may sound simplistic, but they could be effective if we could just focus on these things. I mean, so much things have been said about technical issues, this technical jargons all over. I'm sick and tired of that. What I wanted is something that will really work and fundamental.
I just want to add some point, because if we know that one of the priorities of the Duterte administration is actually to shift the form of government into becoming federal system. So the last point about the election is actually might also be part of the changes that is coming. So we'll see about that. How's the federalism actually is going to work?
Do we have a follow-up here? Is this
Just a reaction. She's talking about the federal form of government. Actually, Duterte will be calling for a constitutional convention. So I think, I don't know, I just came, if we have also include the people's agenda, that we should get some people from that really progressive become part of the CONCON.
Oh, was that an addition? Or did you recorded that now? Okay. Yeah, it's good to, we'll take note of all these records. Just to let you know, please hold on to them because we're gonna have breakout groups where where each group is assigned a butcher paper. So if you have these ideas or inputs, please write it down so we can gather the data and send it back to the Philippines.
Yes. And then are these related?
Are we sure of a monitoring mechanism? If we so decide and come out with these insights into how we can help our country, do we have an arranged mechanism where we can be assured that all of this will be brought up with the right people and actions will be taken on them?
Do you have a follow-up to that, or is it
Well,
different?
my question was, I wanted to know the process of how these points were made and like who was making them. Was it buy-in in the Philippines or here, or was it like NBS? Like
Maybe before we go to that question, do you have a follow-up to what was just said?
I would like to talk more about corruption.
Oh. So maybe we can answer yours.
Okay, maybe we can answer yours real quickly and then we'll talk about the corruption.
I mean, we were all there, no?
Yes. Okay. Well, actually, these points, it came through a process of consultation. Like there were people summit in Zamboanga, in different provinces, in different regions, and then there were, and then besides the geographical consultations, there are also consultations with the farmers, with the workers, with the women, with the migrants. So this was not, picked out of thin air. These actually went through a series of assemblies and consultations, which were put together during the People's Summit in Manila.
So in terms, I guess, of what he's asking in the process, what we can guarantee you is this is exactly how we, as a movement, should proceed. Consult people and ask them what they think of how we should do this, right? Versus, like in the previous administrations or in the previous practices where it's only those lawmakers who actually come up with these ideas on how to govern. So what we can assure you is that we are going to take all these questions, we're going to bring it up to our partner organizations in the Philippines, and it's we can take it from there. But the point is, what we are doing is this is actually the correct practice of democracy. Asking people, we being abroad also have the voice, right? It's not just by voting. And because some of us are still Filipino citizens, we have every right to participate in how the government should run.
And we always remain a Filipino at heart no matter what.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying. So we still have that duty to voice this. And if we don't do things like this and expand more in our community, then those voices will not be heard. And I'm thankful that you guys came over here so that now we have the process. We can start the process by actually registering these questions and bringing it up to our organizations, our partner organizations in the Philippines. And hopefully it will actually reach the correct people and have them addressed. But that's the challenge. It's also up to us to hold them accountable to all these demands.
At the same time, also,
Okay,
also to complement the organizational networking, each individual, because all of us will have certain people that knows the powers that be, we should complement that also and really put pressure, social pressure on people that makes the decisions. Aside from the usual organizational mechanism that will be tapping, each one will be responsible to make a better life for everyone.
I think in response to Kuya, I agree that there should be parang yung pressure and sustaining yung participation of the community, and I think this shouldn't be the last day that we will see each other, right? We represent various organizations and we represent various interests, right? And I think we should ensure that maybe we can meet, create a mechanism for our organizations to continue this dialogue and to follow up with the people's agenda, because even this people's agenda is not the agenda yet, right, of the Duterte administration. It is up to us. It is through our organized actions that we can ensure that the Duterte administration continues
our consent.
It's actually your turn.
Oh, it's my turn. No, I just want to say a little bit of the continuation. We Filipinos has been so suppressed for 400 years under the Spaniards, and then so controlled by, militarization under the Americans. Up to the present moment, we still carry the Marcos regime suppression that we continue the culture of silence because we're afraid. Or we became so passive aggressive that we just say, hayaan mo sila. Leave them alone. Let them do that. Or yung mga aktivista, ano lang yan sila, pampagulo.
Pampagulo, yeah.
We have to realize that it's the activists who created noise to start a change. And even Duterte himself, he was my teacher in law school, and this is in the midst of killings in Davao. You will be afraid walking in Davao. I'm from Davao. I studied nursing in Davao. Of course, my origin is Lanao. But I studied nursing in Davao. And you have to be careful walking in my nursing school that's called Madapo Hills. That Madapo kills. What is it right now? Because of Duterte, it became a resort. What is Davao right now? Including healthcare, even smoking in public. You have to be careful because it is being promoted by the government of Davao. So we can use that as a pilot. Now it's time for us not to be passive aggressive. It's time for us to build that movement that we are able to talk like adults and we're able to present what we want in a proposal form. Like, this is what we want because this is the reason. It's like, ayaw namin, hayaan mo sila. Even in US, there's so much Republican Filipinos here. Why? Because Filipinos are not so critical. They just open the television and open their mouth and let the TV feed them. So we have to be careful. America wants to say Duterte is not. How can he be? Oh my God! Don't let me vomit. Duterte is ideal. If you will see Davao, come with me. Sarah, her daughter, and the brother, nobody stood up against them during that election because these people really work for the people. And I can witness to that. So let's make use of that right now for us to become adult in order for us to present what we need. And this is the written agenda, and we want to expand on that more. Please, let's organize. Let's come back. Let's talk. There's Bayan. There's NAFCON that we can ask that let us become a member of you so we can get involved in the forum in demanding these changes in the Philippines. Because it's only us. If we take that sovereignty, we'll be respected by other countries, the other people. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, that concludes the presentation of the agenda itself, but it's kind of funny because Poetry is actually about to perform with a group called Kinding Sindao. So it's kind of funny that she has the last comment. So please give it up for Kinding Sindao.
What I'm gonna present to you is a very ancient musical instrument that you will never see in your life. It's up to you. You will listen. This is colonized art that you will not see anywhere. And believe me, you're talking to a tradition bearer, and I'm very rare.
I appreciate it. Sitting right there.
All right, thank you very much for staying, gentlemen. Don't be shy, come over. This is 2 minutes, and this is like a lifetime of your experience. Do you understand that can tell, and I have a sprain, and I'm in pain. In medical terms, this is more than 10. I'm not supposed to be standing here for you, and this is supposed to be treated few audience, small instrument, little performance. But I'm taking this as a major performance. You know why? This is a very pivoting event in our lives, not only among Filipinos, but from you guys who believe that change is important, from you guys that humanity is important. All right, this dance, I'm not supposed to be dancing, it's supposed to be my daughter, but she's late, so I will just dance. How about that? Take the stage. I'll take the stage.
Take it away.
Take it away. So I'm a Maranao. I came from a tribe in the Philippines, one of those few tribes that turned Muslim in 15th century. Otherwise, the culture and tradition I'm showing to you, which is a Malayo heritage history, a Malayo heritage, is coming from 4th to 10th century. It is part of an epic that this afternoon, I would like to ask you to give that title for this event. How about that? Yes. Kini-kini ka, apir ka, ikulat akan suka sa mandiro magsadiwang matampar sa kawanan na pagilay ka. Apir ka, ubang kakapir wiswa maran, tungyan ka di ako rangkanian. Ding ding adiawa, pasalang kasu ako, adin maniku sudatu, agagup ka mamento. known there's a title, but I'm going to give you a title for today's summit. What's the title?
Life's journey.
Life's Journey. Epic. Yeah, life's journey. That is our journey. That's our everyday journey. We have to reclaim that. Just like the mission of Tinisidaw. We reclaim, we assert. Because this is a culture and tradition that is systematically destroyed by the colonizers, by the colonial mentality. So we assert, we preserve, we keep it intact, not to mix it with some other stuff that we want it to be, but we keep it intact according to the context of the epic. We recreate. And today, before I will go, I'll present to you the next generation of the tradition bearer. That's Malaika.
Okay.
And she's gonna give you the dance of emotion. You see, this is thanks a let Malaika dance. She traveled hard from New Paltz. She traveled hard from New Paltz. This is the dance where we Maranao people are not allowed to express our emotion as women, but because of women's generation thinking, the Maranao people was able to create this dance called Kaika, where she's able to express her anger, her love, her sadness.
Amongst ourselves. We've seen cultural performances, we've seen presentation of the agenda and the national situation of the Philippines. So now we're going to go into 3 breakout groups. Please assign yourselves accordingly, like we said in the beginning, whatever sector you feel the most aligned to, whether in your lived experience or your own interests. Please divide up into women, youth and students, or migrants. And so the groups will be by the posters. Okay, as we're all aligning ourselves, I just want to introduce the facilitators for each group. So for youth and students, we have Gian. Well, Gian will facilitate. For women, we have Janine. Please navigate around Janine for women. And minors, we have Dad. Questions are gonna be over here as well. So everyone, your breakout discussion questions are on the board. So one, if you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. Okay, great. So here are the questions. Thank you for assigning yourselves. So number one, what issues are your sector facing in the US and in the Philippines? And two, what did you like and what did you not like about the agenda? And three, how can we make sure the Duterte administration is held accountable to its practices? So thank you. Please converse amongst yourselves and make sure you have a note taker and everything is written down. Thank you. So we'll have 20 minutes.
But working with people who were planning to do something about TPP on September 17th. We don't have anything planned yet. We're also trying to get some meetings on progressive groups, environmental groups, but we would love to also have you guys join. Okay. Yeah, give me
Sorry.
thanks a lot. Okay, great.
You have a piece of paper, yeah.
Okay, so we're just doing introduction.
Are you with Trade Justice Online?
No, I'm basically with Party of Communists USA, but we also have a kind of workers' front group called Labor Today.
Oh,
we're doing
yeah,
it
that's
under
right.
that name. This is the party.
Oh, great.
And
Yes, that's
okay, that's Northeast.
Yeah.
Okay, and then that's to you, correct?
Yeah, so that, oh, actually, you can, I'll give you my personal also.
I'll remind you when I send it.
Great, thank you.
Also, my roommate is Daniel Miller, who works with you.
Oh, great.
You all right with locking up?
Yes.
He left me a pair of keys in case there's a
Oh,
problem.
that's so funny.
No, but you're all right.
Yeah, we're okay. Orlando walked me through everything.
Okay, thank you very much. I
Thank
really
you,
appreciate it.
Hi,
Are you doing women's sector?
am I doing women's work now?
Yeah, no, but you're gonna be part
I'll
of
be
it.
here.
Okay. You are her parent.
I'm the father.
And even if you weren't. Okay, so who would like to real quick?
So now we'll jump straight into the questions. So the first question is, what issues
Okay.
are
Conversation.
students facing now in plastic? So we're starting like.
I'm not taking notes. I'm gonna just do it.
Yeah, or is it whatever your memory is of the.
That's simply something.
Yeah, no, it's okay, so the first question is. So the first question is, what issues are migrants or women facing now in the US and the Philippines? So what are some issues that come to mind? And understanding, and even in the country, it's very similar to that. So, so what are the major issues that we want to highlight?
We've all listened to something very high.
Yeah, oh no, we can do that in number 2 about the agenda. Oh, you mean like the situation? Yeah, that's just so yeah, we're covering
So we're gonna have a discussion on the issue.
So, and what else did I say about it?
Just a lot of it is like on the side. I don't know all the details.
And also, so just to touch upon the forced migration labor aspect, that actually the majority of Filipino migrant workers are Filipino. So we talk about the disproportionate impact of the policies in other countries, so Canada, United States, all these legal countries, that have like a disproportionate impact on Filipinos. So we think of the type of work that migrants are getting, right? So a lot of it is domestic work, service sector. A lot of those are. Okay, so to Karen's point about reproductive health care, right? So, so what do we know about reproductive health care? What's the state of it?
Context of monogamous marriage or and then there's I believe there's also a thing where you can't give birth outside of a hospital. I have family that actually they're either doctors who had different births that were outside the hospital. They're not from Manila. And also most people don't have the
So we don't have.
So my parents are they're born in the 40s and 50s, so that was the time where it was normal. I think it still is normal, but now they're with the UN, they're trying to make it.
The government.
They're trying to regulate.
So that's why they're trying to.
Right, so like,
But they spoke it in the language of safety,
abortion is illegal.
I would say that. Anything else about what? So before we move on to the second point, Mike. So what aspect?
Basically, I mean, it's still a show in the Philippines. I mean, they kind of somewhat try to normalize it, but it's still frowned upon, especially with the militarization and some of the things that happened in the past. I think it's what also is just back to what Laura said earlier, because it's a primarily Catholic country. They're quoting a text from in the Old Testament to justify man with woman only, not man with man, or women with women. And then there's also just for the whole acronym of LGBTQIGNC, sorry. Isn't it? Don't they only recognize LGBT? They're past
Not
that.
even Q.
Yeah, they don't even see Q. So there's no. You are only a man, you're only a woman genetically, and then they don't recognize anything else past that. No other definition between. And then there's the very, very set kind of binary rules, regardless of if you are a man, woman, LGBT. And then there's disproportion being LGBT.
Is there sexual? Are there anti-homosexual laws in the Philippines?
Pardon?
They're not exactly laws, but then it's just like how they're discriminated against because it's central in cultural aspect. It's like even though some folks are saying like, oh yes, you see very prominent like LGBT like actors and actresses, but then it's just like they're stuck in this kind of personality like a gay man must like if they're anything but a feminine gay man, like no, that's wrong. Like we cannot accept that. And for like a lesbian woman, they have to be set in like a very
Like masculine presenting. Like that's it's a very like binary, limited understanding of what it means to be.
And you're just being discriminated against.
And the larger issues that lesbian women are paid lower wages because they are hired since they won't get pregnant, but then paid lower wages to do the same work as a man.
It's like higher recruitment of like if a woman is masculine presenting and assume an employer will assume that they are that they are actually like targeted to work because of what Nat just mentioned. You know, the fact that they will likely not get married, they can't legally get married, so that means you're not going to take time. You're probably not going to have children. All of those assumptions are made based on that kind of presentation. So I just think we'll move on to 2 and 3, but I think what's bearing out is that these are reflections, and especially the particular impact and how it bears out in the women's sector of the semi-feudal, semi-colonial character of the Philippines, right? Like all of these things. So this is like basically the semi-feudal, semi-colonial view of women in the Philippines. So the second thing, okay, so if there aren't any other major issues, what do we like and what do we not like about the agenda as it relates to Pardon?
What was missing?
What was missing?
Yeah, I don't know what was missing. I think what I heard was fully progressive agenda.
So we should say that progressive agenda did have a focus on women, particularly in social policy. Any other, because that had like a specific discussion about it. Other aspects of the agenda that we liked or didn't like.
Something that I was curious is that you talk about the PPP. So like 50% is public, 50% is private, right? So I didn't see in any agenda that you say why not everything return to the government. You're not thinking like that's a way to do it or not. You just try to follow like privatize. Like I don't know what is your thinking. You want to keep going down the PPP or not? You want to change it to be everything public, for example. I don't know what is your point in that case. What do you suggest the agenda? If it's to privatize everything, to keep things like that, or change it?
Got it. So I think we should say clarity on PPP, and I think what the agenda is trying to show is to end that policy under APP, right? But it was like as a whole. It wasn't like a specific thing about the public. Basically, there were like summary points that we didn't go into in the agenda, but this is definitely like an economic policy of an aspect of a manifestation of an economic policy, and the whole agenda was to like that's the alternative to the economic policy. So, but it's not clear.
What does the PPP stand for?
Public-private partnership.
Okay,
so
that was under.
yeah. So, and it's one of like the hallmarks. I mean, and there have been many other forms of this under previous administrations, but given with Duterte, that we're hoping, even though he had said in his APEC program that he doesn't plan to change too much, economically. But this is something that has like a tremendous impact on all people, but particularly women. Like you're talking about like transportation, you're talking about basic roads, and you're talking about housing, like the whole economic and social policy aspects of the agenda are total like alternatives to this plan that. So we're hoping to push it forward, obviously, those policies that we mentioned. Can you say your name real quick?
Jonas. Philippine American
work in an organization, City College of New York.
Cool.
Sorry. I just know.
Wait, wait, now? Sorry, later discussion.
So now we're to about things that we didn't like about the agenda. Other things that we didn't like. Something I know. Well, one thing I'm going to mention, is about workers. So as we saw in that both economic and social policies, yes, that a lot about ending contractual work, right? And just in terms of ensuring that the quality of employment, right? Because Aquino and previous presidents have said, oh, employment is up, everyone's doing great, X, Y, Z. And but the thing is, if they're contractualized workers, if these are people that are either in between contracts or perhaps have a job and won't have it in 3 to 6 months or at the end of the 6 months, it doesn't make you're virtually unemployed. You're basically right? So the agenda definitely set forth a plan to ensure to end contractualized labor, and specifically women, given that half of workers are women. The contractualization is just the domino effects of contractualization in terms of women workers, right? How it bears the fact that contractualized workers don't have benefits, they can't take leave, they can't take care of their children, they, so all of that, just the ending of the contractualization, ensuring that workers have rights and have benefits and are not by contract, is something that definitely affects women. You're gonna say something, Mike?
Yeah. I mean, even with the contractualization, SM is a thing where they hire people at a certain age. And once you reach a certain gap, like the peak of your age, like they cut you off. So basically, they're trying to preserve like the youth look of like how SM should be like, which is the wrong way of like how people should get, and they don't get the benefits of it too before they make the cut of like I think your what is it called? Once you hit your marker of like when you get benefits, they actually fire you right. Yeah, the final.
Those before you reach that stage, contractually, they fire you before you reach.
Like you have 180 days.
Part of it,
something that we wanted to add. I just think another thing. Also, I have women in so any other things that we like or
have land. At least 25% of the total land. Do you know in Venezuela only 5% of the population own 95% of the total land holding? That is how poor the Venezuela is. And it's only the Venezuela with European descent that owns the land.
Pamasahe sa pagkain. Meron talaga. Tulad ni nandiyan sa ngayon, medyo elitista. Hindi nila alam talaga yung problema ng mga So I think we have to say, we can identify kung sino yung mga permissive yung tao yung kasi we can have like system na ganyan. Kasi parang ngayon, parang sino lang yung nakusuhan.
Ang hindi lang yung say kung sino yung mas masusunod na
so nobody is they promise something then
maybe we can reroute to the question of what for specific in the agenda.
So are there any other issues you wanted to highlight, one or two? Yeah, let's just start happening. Okay. Don't forget it, let's do 3. can wrap it in your three. So what are ways that we can make the Fair Day administration accountable to its promises? I think we've seen some promising appointments.
That was a quick question that was going to ask because this is totally new. I don't know coffee.
This is also new to us.
But
I mean, I've never known.
the first thing you ask for any administration is appointments.
Pardon?
Appointments.
Yes. So I
And
think
because like you look at Obama, he appointed a lot of appointments. When he first came to office, like, what's going on here? Now I know why he did, but what has Duterte? What has he? Who has he appointed? Has he appointed people that we know that are progressive?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
That's
let's
good.
say
That's good sign.
he has appointed some progressive people. He's appointed a former chair of Gabriela Philippines, Samasa, and he also directs the Department of Agrarian Reform. He appointed Kapayang Mariano, who is a former Congress member and the chair of Ana from Agamenches, or peasant organizations. So he has done some progressive appointments, but you know those two actors similar in how Congress is in the Philippines. Okay. Oh wait, 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Yeah. 2 minutes. Okay. So you know, but the thing is also about how they interact with their other colleagues, right? Like 2 is small in the you know how many. So they've been promising. Yes.
Do you know who are the supporters for the water? I mean, who are the people who are working with? Because also through that, knowing that, you will know actually who is going to play this. Because if he's the capitalist, or he is, who is like behind him? So it's really important to know them and talk to them also. Not just with the guy, because it's just a representation. Behind
Okay, let's do like 2 more.
Ito, yung present siya. He's there to present and so that I don't know. Pero I am sure Duterte will do something.
Well, I was impressed with sabi na I was impressed with ginawa niya na those people who are rallying and then he entertained it.
Pinapasok niya sa mga.
Yes. So that's a plus point for me. I wish yes. Rally for more.
Wala lahat ng mali. Okay, one. Sino ba kasi rally? Kaya kung ano yung rally.
Yeah, but your question is accountability.
Hinihiling kasi natin sa Pilipinas.
Well, he's only like what, a week now? And he did like what, killed a lot of drug lords?
Hindi lang sa streets. So, bigyan pa natin ng 120 days. 120 days. Yun eh, siyempre at least, yung ano kayo nakikita yung best way.
Hindi lang sa lansangan, pati sa social media. Kasi malaki ang audience ng social media.
Yes, exactly.
So, gamitin natin yung Facebook, yung website natin. Tapos,
isang nakikita ko is yung magkaroon siguro ng at least monthly talaga na parang consultation na pwede tayo mag-Skype sa siya yung kinausap.
So he's just representing those
because like I think we talk about gender social change. You know, like especially like what people said in this group already, right? We have to make sure that people know what's going on. We have to make sure that people know right how to actually hold the council. People have to be organized around. It's like when we talk about genuine social change, it's like, well, can Duterte, as well as like many other presidents, right, actually give genuine social change? Like, or is he just like another pawn or puppet, right, of U.S. imperialism? So I think those are things
Sa Kongreso?
I mean, because it's like we don't even have a big scale. I mean, like that's one thing that we have. Like we have iron ores and everything, but yeah.
No indigenous company.
Right, no, but all the ores are indigenous to the country, you know, and their workers are also indigenous to the country. So we definitely have the resources, all of the resources. It's just that the ores are taken, as we mentioned earlier today, are taken straight to a ship and then sent to the multinational corporation where they're headquartered. So, you know, so that the money, the processes that actually that result in money for the economy are not from, you know, but it's our environmental space. So, are there anything else?
Marami, no? Sa totoo lang, kulang po para sa ating mga snacks. Pero yung mga basic na kailangan. So yeah, I think si Mama Gertrude yung
please have someone assigned to give report back.
Sipong Rodriguez si ate. Ate.
Maniain. Kahit lumabas na sa news.
No, ikaw na. You're standing there.
Okay lang. Magkakaroon din kami niyan.
Dalawa lang yung English ko. Hindi, puro English. Ayaw mo. Wow! Bisaya yan, pwede.
If you can hear me, say hey! Great. So I walked around all the different groups, and there are really great conversations happening everywhere. So now if we can just open it back up and have a report back from each group about what you discussed on these 3 questions. And we can start with the migrants group. You all have a reporter? Migrants group. And then I can hold it. Yeah. Okay. Are you sure? Gary, do you have someone to give the report back?
Sir Gary,
Okay, so if you could all give Gary your attention. Anyone want to join Kuya Gary?
Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone.
attention, please.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. We are the migrants group. Actually, we are members of migrants.
Yeah, we are. Marami po kami.
Yes. So the time that was allotted to us is not enough for all of our demands and all of our
Concerns.
So what we came up with as far as identifying more issues, we've already identified some that have already been mentioned in the people's agenda. And again, like I said, the migrants also have a separate list of demands to President Duterte. But as we further discuss our conditions, we came up with some more issues. No? So number one problem kasi is that the migrant workers in the US are not considered OFWs. So that's one thing that we want to ensure. Kasi if you're not OFW, meaning you didn't go through OWA or POEA or DOLE, you don't get any of those benefits that OFWs get. A lot of workers in the US and other countries are migrant workers, meaning either they're trafficked or they came there to be a family and everything. But we're still Filipino citizens.
And we're paying taxes.
Yeah, we're paying taxes, but we don't get the same benefits as OFWs. So we are migrant workers. So yun yung isa. Is that the categorization of the government needs to include all migrant workers. So something about yung kasing na-identify yung isang kasama namin doon is ang number one problem daw is starting from the agencies. So talagang start to address yung problema with the agencies by coming up with really concrete policies in screening and identifying sino ba itong mga agencies na to. Kasi doon talaga nag-uumpisa yung a lot of the problems, you know. False promises, etc. Other major concern is yung emergency assistance. There's a lot of money collected from us, pero when migrants are faced with problems, you know, even coming to the U.S. consulates or embassies, we barely get any assistance, particularly financial assistance. So, but we know that there's always money available, but there's nothing that's given to the migrant workers. That's another one. And we also understand that a lot of the consuls and ambassadors are appointed. They're not elected. We don't get to vote who they are. But for somehow, we want to have a voice or a say in terms of who gets appointed. You know, so like for example, identifying or proposing some progressives who can be appointed as ambassadors or consuls, or even not the consular ambassadors, but to be part of the
selection process
of the consulate. No?
The guy who understands the problem.
Exactly. So someone who is progressive. Yeah. So, yun, ito, I mean, the other ones that were mentioned is yung protection assistance that's already given. Now, the other concern is how do we make the government accountable in the next 100 days, because the people's agenda is supposed to be for the next 100 days. So, yun napansin kasi namin, we noticed that during the first day of President Duterte, he actually opened the doors to the rallies, you know? And so we're saying we should do more rallies so that he would actually listen to us more.
Because President Duterte is a socialist.
Yeah. So that's one. Another one, we believe in the power of the social media. And then for us here, particularly being in the US, we would like to conduct like a monthly Skype or any other matter of video with the Philippine representatives, you know, so that we could get like the status report to ano na nangyayari doon sa mga demands natin.
Maybe can you coordinate, say, with the Tri Media, aside from social media, try to include us in a regular program, or you know, like sana yung the local version ng consultation sa president. Tayo man dito people's consultation ngayon. Feedback.
That's a good point, sir. Can I make one comment?
Sure.
Because this is one thing I observed with the Philippine consulate in Hong Kong. Because 18 years ago, my wife accidentally gave birth to my youngest.
Accident, sir?
We were on a tour. My wife was supposed to give birth after 3 weeks, but unfortunately, but when I was when I registered the birth certificate of my son in Hong Kong, it only took me 2 hours to finish the document.
Wow.
Which is impossible in the Philippines.
Impressive.
Now, when I was applying for the passport of my kid, this girl at the Philippine embassy told me it will take me at least 1 week to get a passport, and I voiced out. And one thing I observed, the people in the consulate, they look down on most migrants, especially because most of the people in Hong Kong are domestic helper. You know, when I saw them shouting at these people, I voiced out. I told them, do you know that
Who's
without
paying?
these people, you won't be here and be receiving your salary. You see, one thing, we have the bad culture. But you know why? You give one barangay tanod, only stick, some, and that very moment, his attitude will change. I am now here to be recognized. That is our culture. We have to change that.
You have to start changing that.
Among ourselves.
Yes,
So
sir.
I think also yung yung potential mo pasensyoso. Tuturo natin kung tayo maging pasensyoso, no? Pasensya ka na, wag. Pag nakita yung pagkakamali, ituwid natin kasi tayo rin magdurusa eh.
Correct. So yung last demand namin is yung labor exports program, basura na talaga and create more jobs at home.
Especially you know, I'm in the travel business before, and I'm also I entered into this business. I quit after within a year. I quit because I cannot just stomach.
So, yun po ang aming report. Maraming salamat po.
So thank you, Migrants Group. So for our next group, I'd like to call up the youth and students for your report back.
So we're the youth and student group, and the issues that were pointed out, just like from the People's Agenda, was the affordability of the education system in the Philippines, the cultural revolution that needs to be started by the youth so that they can be a little more involved, the corruption in the private sector, the landlessness and joblessness, the financial aid and student loans that affect all students, the lack of character education and irrelevant education that's pressed on to the students, and the uninformed about problems, and they don't know how to find certain solutions to it, and we need to correct the incorrect ideas and education from the colonizers, who basically wrote the books and are still implemented today.
One thing that we got concerning what people or the students like about the agenda was that we something that the youth and students in the Philippines and us here also to fight for with to end corruption in the education sector. The youth, because and a lot of revolution or change in society is always started by the youth. They have the stamina, the energy to bring about what change they need because they're the coming generation and they give the society which will benefit them, not benefit from other classes of people. Youth need to be nationalists. They pro people and the form of democratic education. And one thing we like about the agenda was that apparently the fact that it was presented that Duterte was not supported by the oligarchs. More youth should know that there is oligarchs supporting candidates, just other candidates that are not. And we should, as youth, we should support candidates that fight for our interests, not the interests of companies.
So to hold Duterte accountable, just like what the migrant group said, have like Skype or social media to help keep him accountable, have the transparency within the executive order, the pro-people allocation of money, the continuing revolution mass movements by the activist groups, and social change can't come entirely by the Duterte party. It comes from basically the workers, the people, because when the people are united, they're never defeated.
Ang tao, ang bayan!
Kayo na lumalaban!
Kayo na lumalaban!
Ang tao, ang bayan!
Thank you, IS Group! So for our final report back, I'd like to bring up the reporters for the women's group. Give it up for them.
It's outlining what we discussed earlier. We talked about the issue of forced labor and how many women are being forced out, and send this into the migrant labor that's leaving the Philippines are women. That was a major concern that we had. And since we have a new administration, the focus now is to deal with the question of migration, also deal with the question of reproductive health care and lack of. And that includes the difficult process of getting abortion legalized. Even though we know it's a Catholic country, that's something that should be focused as a progressive agenda, part of the progressive agenda. Sex trafficking is a major issue, and obviously that's a consequence of many years of colonialism, and that's something that we have to address, along with lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender rights, a major issue that has to be addressed by the present government. The issue of militarization is very much part of the source of the problem of discrimination of women in the Philippines. It's something that the new administration has to immediately address as a primary issue. One of the things that we talked about in terms of the lesbian rights for women, talking about that many of them were being discriminated against, and especially those who are they were discriminated against due to the fact that they were not able to get pregnant, and therefore they were paid less as a consequence. So that's something that has to be addressed. As far as the what should be added or what was discussed in terms of the agenda, there was issues about clarity with the public-private policy, and to examine that policy as a right now that the Duterte government is not opposed to it, but we're trying to look at as a possible policy for progressive change. That's something that has to be addressed. But one of the issues of contractual work have to be addressed. That's a major policy that labor policy that the new government should be tackling, where contract labor essentially is a norm in many cases. That we want to change that to become permanent labor, where they have rights for medical care and pension benefits. And elimination of age discrimination and the harassment of the workplace and schools. In terms of the final thing on the agenda was the issue of what can be done to safeguard the fundamental changes or the promises. One of the things that we talked about is the Duterte's government, whether or not he's been appointing progressive individuals, and I've been informed that he has been. I guess people here can talk about that. That's a good sign, especially given the fact that we know, at least as an American, how once Obama got elected, he basically thought there was going to be change, and he appointed everyone who was in part of the Clinton administration. So we see fundamental changes there. We should also talk about those supporters that are in society and in government, and to strengthen that apparatus, and to he's part of the elite, I was told, and that as we should have also as far as regular meetings with the progressive forces, that they consider having meetings with the administration and includes monitoring not only domestic issues but foreign policy relationships, which he has stated that will be an independent course. So those are the things that we should target and focus on. Is that it?
Thank you, women's group. So to wrap up our conversations, we would like to just pose a question to the entire audience. So what do we do now? We heard a lot of these next steps from the group, but yeah, what do folks think we should do? You know, because we're all here, we all learned the People's Agenda, we learned the context of the Philippines and the current political moment, and we had these brainstorms. But as a group, collectively, what should we do now?
Sustain the momentum.
Okay, how do we do that? Social media.
Social media, and we should have like, say, a program of meetings so we can exchange ideas and really focus on monitoring the what we have talked about and expand the reach.
Educated. And those who doesn't know much more detail, because honestly, whatever you say, sir, with both of you, some of them I know, some of them I don't know. So I'm glad that I heard your voice, because at least now I learned something, and learning is a everyday process. So having this kind of meetings, having this kind of discussion whatsoever, somehow we educate people and we learn at the same time. So glad to know that there's a lot of people who are still makabayans and not all like talking about American shit.
Popularize the struggle. Popularize the struggle.
Popularize the struggle.
I am here for the long-term solution, and I think Duterte is in the right track. I'm here for the change of the constitution. You know why I'm going to explain? I have to explain to you about the change of constitution. We have the presidential form of government, and this form of government is a failure. Look at South America and Africa. In Africa, only one country has a different form of government, and that is South Africa. It's the only progressive country in the entire Africa. Do you know that the GDP of Egypt is just like the Philippines? There are 100 million Egyptian, 100 million Filipinos. Egypt is a civilization of 4,000 years. How come that they are so backward? Because of the presidential form of government. You know, if you will change to a parliamentary government, it will be the people will be ruling the government, not the oligarchs.
Sige po, salamat. Are there other inputs?
I think one solution for corruption which exists in not only the Philippines and a lot of countries is the idea that there's no solidarity, there's no unity between the people. That they think that my interest is against your interest, but altogether they have the same interest against another class that actually wants to take what the people have, majority have. The people should be more conscious of the fact that they are fighting against what majority they want and what small percentage wants for themselves. There's that conflict, and people should know about that idea.
Yes. Yes. So how do we build solidarity and unity?
Neil.
Neil. What's talking about, Ives?
I have 3 suggestions. One, the People's Agenda is already, I think, there's a document, the People's Agenda. It's like, I think, 100-something page document. I think all of the organizations here we should disseminate that document, the People's Agenda, and bring it back to our organizations and discuss it. Right. Second, I think in terms of sustaining, like what Kuya has mentioned, and what we mentioned earlier as well, is like maybe we should have a follow-up from this People's Summit. So with the sign-up sheet, right? Maybe there can be a future date that can be arranged where we can bring in, where we can convene again. And then the third point is, I know our organizations have other networks, right? Other regional Filipino organizations, Filipino church organizations, and other community groups. We should bring them to the follow-up meeting so we can expand and widen the base that supports the people's agenda.
Great. So is that a suggestion for a network or some type of alliance?
I don't know.
Or
Whatever form it is.
whatever,
Make it
some kind
simple,
of
just bring
foundation.
one or two, for each meeting, if they add up over time.
Yeah.
I came very late. I really don't know. We discuss about the youth, the students, the migrants, the women. The one that we have a big problem in the Philippines right now. I hope everybody knows. Drugs. Okay, so it's not. It's I don't know if it was discussed when I came. It was discussed only the graft and corruption. We have a big problem of drugs in the Philippines. It's deeply rooted among the youth, the students, the women, everybody. That's a big problem now, and it is addressed in the Philippines. I am not asking about. It's not really. Duterte is addressing it very unorthodox. I'm not telling you that what to do, but let's also have to be on our mind that we have a big problem in the Philippines, the drug problem in the Philippines.
Thank you for bringing that. So just to explain the basis for the sectors, we wanted to reflect the sectors of Filipino communities here in the United States, because what we see is, of course, there are no Filipino peasants in the U.S., right? Or acting as peasants, because the U.S. is a highly industrialized country, or a highly developed country already. So that's why we wanted to reflect the youth and students, migrants and women, because that's us, right? That is us here, Filipinos who have been pushed out of our home country to the United States. So we wanted to, bring this People Summit together to really bring home the message that us Filipinos and also non-compatriots and solidarity allies, we can bring about a genuine change in the Philippines by waging campaigns, by coming together in unity and solidarity to fight for change and liberation back home. So I'm really excited for the follow-up, everyone, and thank you for staying another almost hour beyond the scheduled program. But we just wanted to close it up. If anyone has any announcements, we can give them now. Yes.
I have a flyer here on behalf of Christopher Bolin. I don't know if you know who he is. He's an independent journalist, and he's done the best work around 9/11 truth. He basically goes over who actually did 9/11, and he focuses on the neoconservatives, especially PNAC, and the Israelis. We think the Israelis were the ones that basically, in government, basically many of them have dual national citizenship, Israeli and American, that have very much infiltrated the government, controlled the demolition as well as the cover-up of 9/11. So this is a flyer on his videos and how to get his books. That's basically what it says.
Maybe you could thank you. Yeah. Okay. Another announcement. Oh, Anna.
Hi. We have another forum next Saturday, July 16th. It's about the corporate capture over nations. The topic is specifically about the investor-state dispute settlement, or the ISDS, and specifically exactly industries going into ISDS, disputes with developing countries like El Salvador, Honduras. We're expecting people from El Salvador, from the Philippines, and organizations campaigning against ISDS in the event. Flyers are there at the registration. It's going to be at the Church of St. Paul and St. Andrew from 12 o'clock.
July 24th, Migrante New York is having our regular meeting here in the same space around the same time. Well, we actually start at 3. So people are welcome to come and observe and participate. We will have lawyers and some speakers. And it's potluck, so please bring food with you if you are planning to come. Thank you.
Just one little announcement.
announcement. On July 20th, the Philippine government will report at the UN about the National Voluntary Report, the Agenda 2030 basically, and the Filipino group within the UN is planning to do an action outside the UN premises. We will send the information to Bayan USA about the action. So yeah, please come if you're available. July 20th.
Also, I represent the elderly. Switchable. No, we have always believed that there should be a partnership between the elderly and the youth sector. Diba sa ating mga Pilipino, we care about the elderly. I think that's very innate in our culture. And so right now, we're struggling and we need all the help, especially for grant writers. You know, we're looking for grants, money, to keep us going, to be able to put up a senior center in Woodside. The first Filipino one, if ever. And it's going to be operationalized like a Filipino.
Yes.
And ethnicize. It's being encouraged now to ethnicize operation because, you know, the happier they are, the more contented they are, the more you prolong their lives and the more you prolong their institutionalization, which is more expensive for the American government to support. So anyway, my email is listed over there. My name is Jim Dizon and I'm with Pagasa. Mabuhay ka, kapatid.
Mabuhay! Ay, isang kapatid ay may sasabihin.
Salamat po.
Sandali lang po. Ano lang, galing po ako sa National Alliance for Filipino Concerns. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Ako si Melanie. Ninasan po namin imbitahin ng lahat ng mga kasamahan natin dito sa open house picnic ng NAFCON. Mangyayari po siya sa Gantry Park sa Long Island City. So, mangyayari po siya sa August 31 at magsisimula po siya ng mga 12 p.m. to whenever, to 6 p.m. So, kung kaya niyo po magdala ng pagkain, that would be great. Pero magdadala rin kami ng pagkain. Okay, so we'll ask kung nasa lister po kayo ng ng ibang mga organizations, we'll be sending out the information. Salamat.
My last word, because I'm an advocate of the constitutional change, no? Now, I want to talk about the change of the name of the Philippines. You people, this should be.
Oh, I'm sorry, is this an announcement?
Do you know that the name Philippines?
Sir, I'm sorry. Close the program. So last announcement, but we can continue the conversation. Is that okay? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so the last announcement, this might be a great follow-up activity to our People's Summit, which we've all been building up to as Bayan USA Northeast, is our Sona ng Bayan, which is People's State of the Nation Address. This will be Friday, July 22, 2016, outside of Crystals. 6902 Roosevelt Avenue. So this happens every year to reflect the big SONA that happens in the Philippines. And this year we will have a theme of really celebrating the reforms of Duterte, but challenging him to follow through and to bring genuine change through people's movement. So we hope that you can come out again Friday, July 22nd, 2016. There'll be a lot of cultural performances. There might be food again. So please come. We'd really appreciate it. And so just to close out the space, we're gonna do the Isang Bagsak. And is everyone familiar with Isang Bagsak?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So for the people's agenda, okay, I'm just gonna explain it in case you don't know. This is basically a way we close out our events. So we dedicate the space and then we do a Nisang Bagsak, which is one fall. And so you basically go clap once or do a hook or a step or anything just to symbolize our unity, okay? So for the people's agenda for change and liberation for the people of the Philippines, Isang